It's one of my favorite wine varietals, and it grows in all four corners of the world, even though the world is a ball and there are really no corners. But you get the idea. This wine varietal is so great, it's even got two names, and both of them are extremely successful. Also, what is the average wine enthusiast drinking now? All that and so much more on this episode of The Average Wine Enthusiast. Hi there, everybody. My name's Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. And I really need a haircut, but that's neither here nor there. I thought on this episode, I would talk about a single wine varietal that really never came onto my radar till about 10 years ago. Having said that, this wine varietal was on my radar 20 years ago. How can that be? Well, 20 years ago, it might even be longer than that. I don't remember when I first heard of the wine varietal known as Shiraz, but I knew that it was a big, bold, spicy red wine out of New Zealand and out of Australia. Did I know then that Shiraz wine is produced all over the world and called by a different name? Heck no. But once I first started drinking Syrah, which I want to say was in the Northern California area, I would take my yearly or twice yearly trip out there, and some of the wineries out there started producing Syrah, which like I said, that's when it came onto my radar, and I was duly impressed. I'm not exactly sure what it was about Syrah back then that turned me onto it, but it had a bit of a sophistication to it, I would guess you would say, as opposed to a big fruity Merlot or a Cabernet Sauvignon that was very prevalent in that neck of the woods 10 years ago, even probably long before that. But that's what I was drinking most of. Started drinking Syrah, and I'm like, wow, this stuff is, this is something I really want to seek out and see, what other iterations of this single varietal wine out there. And it turns out that it grows everywhere. It grows in Chile, and obviously it comes from France. The genesis of the Syrah grape comes from, it has some parentage attached to it. The grape Dureza, which is from the southeast part of France, and from Savoy, France, Mondouse Blanche. So these two grapes made Syrah. How it landed, where it landed, we don't really know, because Savoy is a good distance away from where it grows heavily now, and of course the southeast of France is much farther south. So how did it come about to be where it is? Well, a lot of folks have their ideas as far as where it got its name and how it got to become so widely grown. Right now, I think I need to wet my whistle with some fine Spearhead Pinot Noir Rosé. I think it's 2020, might be 2019. I want to say something about Michael Butler, but I don't know what it is. So the genesis of Syrah, the name, where did it come from, and all that kind of stuff. So we got Dureza, we got Mondouse Blanche, created this plant, this vine, that we know at one time had the name Syrah, spelt S-C-Y. C, that's how that you would pronounce that, soft S with soft C, and a Y like cherry or yummy. Syrah, which R-A-S, that's a common suffix in a lot of words. That vine, known as Syrah, which is interesting because it has that Z sound on it, Shiraz. And I also did a show on the place and the wine, Shiraz. Shiraz is, it used to be a central hub for wine, and it was in Persia. And of course, they probably grew amazing Shiraz, Syrah, Shiraz, whatever you want to call it, in Iran. But obviously, that all got kiboshed. Another really good story. Go watch that show from the Average Wine Enthusiast. So some people think that the guy who brought it to the center part of France, Syrah production, got it from Shiraz in Persia and brought it there, even though the grapes that made Syrah come from the south part of France. But this guy was a traveler. And who am I talking about? The guy's name is Gaspard de Sterenberg. So that was this guy. And he traveled all over, and a lot of people traveled back in the day. I'm not exactly sure what he did. But one thing he did do was bring this grape to the Hermitage part of France, which is right in the middle of the Rhone Valley. That's the center right there. Côte-Rôtie and Saint Joseph and Puy and Hermitage. And Hermitage actually is the name a lot of people used to give the Syrah wine at one time, because it was, people thought that's where it came from. And Hermitage comes from the word hermit, and it means it's like a chapel. I suspect people refer to hermits in France the same way that we refer to monks. So this guy was a traveler, settled down in Hermitage, became, religious or whatever. He decided to settle down, got to that age where he was going to devote his life to religion. And when you do that, you got to make wine. And the wine that he, after all his travels, said, I'm going to grow this grape here. And it turned out it was a pretty good idea, because it made a very good wine. And like I said, it grows all over the world. And it is the fourth most planted red wine grape. It has close to 500,000 acres, or 202 hectares in the ground, and that's a lot of wine that produces. That's for sure. So it's a popular grape because it grows all over the world. It grows in Chile. They grow in the United States. They grow here in Canada. Obviously, it's growing in France, and it's growing in New Zealand and Australia. So that's a pretty international grape, if you ask me. What does Syrah taste like that makes it so good? Well, it does have fruity notes to it. Very complex fruity notes, very robust, but not blow up in your mouth like a big sweet cherry or a sweet grape or something like that. It's robust in that the flavor it can be dense. So of course you get those fruit flavors, which are appealing when drinking wine. People like to have some kind of sense that there's some fruit flavor in their wine. They're in their red wine anyway. Plus, there's also other notes in there, cooking type notes. I took a sip of this Syrah here, and some of the notes that I got from drinking this Syrah, which is the Big Head Syrah. What year is it? 2017, out of the Niagara area, which is a very unique area for growing Syrah grapes. But it's pretty good, but it's very unique. That's the thing about Syrah. The phrase I used at least a couple shows ago was it represents its terroir. So in France, Syrah tastes one way, of course, because they have the old world sensibilities. I believe the person who makes the wine here also is trained in old school winemaking, old world winemaking, I should say. There's places in California where it's all new world in a Syrah. And of course, there's the stuff that comes out of Australia that is also big and bold, super fruity, spicy, big red, lots of tannins. But the notes that I got out of here, which are somewhat common, are blueberry and plum. So you're going to get those primary fruit flavors from those dark-skinned fruits. I also tasted some cocoa, some tobacco, some peppercorns, but not the black ones, the green ones. Sage, which for French Syrah, sage is very common because they grow sage in and around the fields there. Same with even in Côte d'Aron, you can get some of those sage notes in some of the wines down there. They also grow lavender there too, so you can sometimes get those notes involved as well, and some clove. You get that. That's also a complex acidic note that I tasted there. Now, there's, like I said, there's so many different ways to make a Syrah, but there's core flavors that you're going to get, core notes of a Syrah, and there's at least a couple in this one for sure. But in the Wine Folly Magnum edition of their book, they have a page of some of the additional tasting notes that you could get from a Syrah. I need to take another sip of this fine Spearhead Pinot Noir Rosé. What year is it? It's 2020. So here's to some 2020 Pinot Noir Rosé from Spearhead. Kudos to Michael Butler. So primary black fruit notes, you're going to get boysenberry, black currant, black raspberry, blackberry ramble, blackberry jam, plum sauce, blueberry, and acai berries. You can also find some black olive, some black cherry, red plum, fruitcake, dried cranberry, raisin, anise, black pepper, green peppercorns. Yeah, imagine that. And some licorice. If you're going to get anise, you're going to get licorice. Odds are high. The sage is also one. Eucalyptus, dried herbs, tar. Nothing like some tar. Graphite, bacon fat, cured meat, tobacco leaf, black cardamom, leather, sassafras, tobacco smoke, espresso, cloves. Cloves. Did we not already have cloves? Maybe not. Cigar box, sweet tobacco, bam, milk chocolate, camphor, allspice, and vanilla. Vanilla you often get if the oak you're aging your wine in is strong oak. That's the flavor profile of Syrah, one of my faves. So this Syrah here is the Big Head Syrah 2017. And it's out of Niagara, which is a unique place to be growing Syrah, that's for sure. You wouldn't think that they had the climate there to grow it, but I think if you grow the right amount on the plot of land, you can get yourself a pretty decent Syrah, and that's what they did here at Big Head Wines. They made a wine in such a way that the people at Big Head make a lot of their wines, if not all their wines. They make it using a method called appassimento, and what that means is that's how they make not Valpolicella, but that's how they make Amarone. They basically dry the grapes out for a period of time. I think they do it on tobacco leaves. So they dry the grapes out for a period of time, and then the wine they make from those grapes has a certain amount of concentration because the flavors from the skin is in whatever juice is left over. They don't dry them right out like prunes or anything, but there's still some juice in there, and from that juice they make the wines that they sell at Big Head Winery. Very unique place for sure. I don't think I would have ever found out about these wines if it wasn't for Mira and Carl Boucher over there at Carl's Wine Club. Here's to those two people. So Syrah wine, what else? How do I want to wrap up the Syrah show? It's not going to be easy to find Syrah. You don't see a lot of it in LCBOs, I know. So it's still one of those wines that if you want a single varietal Syrah, they're growing a bunch out in BC. I already mentioned Carl's Wine Club. Get hooked up with them or someone who can get you some nice BC Syrah. They're growing it in Washington and Oregon and California. And I would highly recommend you get your hands on it. The best Syrah you can get, though, in my opinion, is French wine, which you're going to pay some money if you're getting it right out of the, the Côte de Rôti, the Hermitage, Ampuis area there. That's large coins to buy that Syrah. But it is an option, and it's a good reference point to let you know, how good French Syrah can be compared to, a $50 bottle of a big red or big head Syrah, or a Shiraz out of Barossa Valley in Australia, which you can pay some big dollars for that as well. It's one of those wines, like I said, it's international, and everybody does it differently, but yet it's a great starting place. It's a really good grape to blend with something else, but also on its own, it rocks. Okay, so what is the average wine enthusiast drinking now? One of the bottles that I love getting when I can find them is the Zuccardi Malbec. Zuccardi is a pretty big winery out of Argentina, where they make a heck of a Malbec. And they have different series of this. I don't really know the difference between them because I usually just taste them on their own, and I've never had a bad Zuccardi. So this one that I have here is the Zuccardi Serie A, which I would assume is, Series A, or I'm not exactly sure how they say that, but this is Serie A Malbec from Zuccardi. I know they also have a Zuccardi Q, a big Q at the end of it, so I'm not sure what that is, but this is a Malbec from Mendoza, the Val de Uco. Not exactly how you pronounce that, but Robert Parker, 91 points for the Zuccardi Malbec. It is relatively widespread, the Zuccardi wine, label. It's hard to compare this to some other company in the United States, that makes a whole line of wines. Robert Mondavi comes to mind, but I don't think the Zuccardi, I don't think they're that big, but they do make a lot of wine, and I've seen different variations of their Malbec. I've even seen other single varietals that they make besides Malbec. They grow other grapes in Argentina, I would assume, and Zuccardi takes advantage of that, but I don't know if I've ever seen any blends from them. But anyway, the Zuccardi Malbec, if you can find yourself some of this, and you like Malbec, by the way, it was International Malbec Day a few days ago, but if you're a lover of Malbec and you see some Zuccardi, pick up a few bottles for sure. That's what I do. Whenever I see the Zuccardi stuff out there, I pick it up and stick it in my cellar. And a couple of years down the road, you have a delicious bottle of Malbec to pull out of your cellar. It's one I can highly recommend for just everyday Malbec out there. I think you can pay some big dollars for some stuff from Zuccardi, but for the most part, they are relatively inexpensive and a good bang for your buck. All right, I guess that's going to do it for this episode. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me immensely. If you have any friends who are just like you, who are digging wine just as much as you are, to the point where you're actually watching videos on YouTube about wine, tell them about the Average Wine Enthusiast. I really appreciate it. Any comments? Leave them down below. I'd also like to give a big thank you to the Big Organ Trio for letting me use their music on the show. Until next time, everybody, my name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salute!